most will say, time is passing a lot faster as I grow older. They tell you it's because the brain changes and also you have less time to live. So that causes existential anxiety. It's nothing to do with it. It's the level of creativity. Creativity increases the elongation of time, the perception of elongation of time. So in psychology, what we call the first 30 means that in your first 30 years, it's your first marriage, your first divorce, your first heartbroken, your graduation. Then after that is repetition. So repetition diminishes the perception of time. If you stay curious, like centenarians, they elongate time. You ask centenarians, is time passing faster? No, it's passing the same way because they're curious. Curiosity elongates the perception of time.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, and this is the place where we talk about everything lifestyle and environment and how it relates to our genetic expression. Today, I have a couple of treats here. First of all, to warm you guys up for June 1st when Kate King comes on as my official co-host of our program, she is co-hosting with me today. So welcome, my friend Kate King.
Thank you.
And then I have our guest today. I am so excited. Kate and I are both so excited. We've been talking all weekend about this. I met Dr. Mario Martinez back in 2020 at a longevity conference put on by the group where I got certified with DNA, and sat next to him at a lunch. And I was just like, just drawn to his energy. It was just a great energy. And I was going through, and I'm going to tell you all about him here in a second, but I was going through some things in my office looking for something specific, and I came across his book last week. And the book is called The Mind Body Code. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, Mario is all about longevity, epigenetics, from a psychological standpoint and culture. And we need to see if he'll come on this program and have a conversation. And I reached out to him and there was like no hesitation. And so here we are. We booked it quick. We're recording it and we're just super pumped to have him. Dr. Martinez is a clinical neuropsychologist who specializes in how cultural beliefs affect health and longevity. He proposes, based on multidisciplinary research, that longevity is learned and the causes of health are inherited. For the past 25 years, he has studied healthy centenarians. These are people who are over 100 or older years old worldwide, and found that only 20 to 25% can be attributed to genetics. The rest is related to how they live and the cultural beliefs that they share. He's the author of the best-selling book that I just mentioned, The Mind Body Code, that teaches his theory and practice of biocognitive science for the general public, as well as professionals in life sciences. In addition to longevity, he also lectures on why our immune system is not just a protector. Instead, it responds to the cultural premise we learn to perceive and emote the world. How meaning-making affects biology. Welcome, 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 Dr. Mario Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Pleasure.
This is going to be such a great conversation. So look, we wanted to jump in here so we could get everything in it that we could today. I, of course, fixated on the genes contributing to only 25 to 35% of our overall health. And we talk about all the time on here how it's lifestyle. That's what this podcast is about, how lifestyle and environment affect how our DNA expresses. And so if you're good with starting there, let's start there. And you said that you've got new research on epigenetics. We're ready.
Okay.
Teach us, please.
All right. A lot to say here, but the way it started was that as a neuropsychologist, I was trained to look at the illnesses and the traumas of the brain. And that's what I learned, how when the brain's not working. So that was very depressing. For a while, it was very interesting because I looked at trauma and how it affected behavior. But after a while, I just thought, what would happen if we look at the causes of health instead of what gerontology does, which is studies the illnesses of aging. So what I do is I study the causes of health and the passing of time, and that it just throws the whole paradigm away. But one of the things that I want to talk about is that we talk about mind and body and how they communicate and why is it that they communicate and epigenetics and all that, but nobody really explains how that happens. We can go to the chemical, but it's more of a bioinformational field. And the way to look at it is to use a little bit of developmental or epigenetic anthropology. And when we didn't have a language, let's say before the Cro-Magnons and the Neanderthals, we had grunts and sounds. So if you had a grunt, you went, that meant there's a lion. There's a psychoneurological reaction that says there's fight or flight here, or another one for sex, or another one for food. So we had those grunts already connected to our immune, nervous, and endocrine system. But then we came up with a language. And then the language replaced the grunts, and the brain had to adjust to that. And then we had biosymbolic words. Words have symbols because they went from grunts to sounds that have meaning. And then the meaning maker is the biology. So, for example, from psychoneurology, if you shame somebody, it's a word. You're stupid, that's a word. You'll have molecules of inflammation. Tumor necrosis factors, C-reactive protein. Why? Because we're a bioinformational field that responds to symbols, to the meaning maker. So that was the first part. The second was, if you want to study something in science, you want to look at what works. And who are the experts in longevity? Not me. Centenarians, healthy centenarians that living our theory. And so I wanted to find out about it, and I thought, it's got to be genes, it's got to be genetics. And then after all my work and the work of other people, I found that it's maybe about 20 to 25%. And my colleague at Ellen Langer, she says, you're being so conservative. I think it's only 15. So
Wow.
Wow. Less than we thought.
But the other thing about it is that you look at centenarians, they don't exercise, they don't meditate, they eat whatever they want. They don't do the kinds of things that we do. So what is it? First, they live the things that we're trying to do in structure. They don't work out, but they have a very active life. They don't meditate, but they're very introspective. They eat whatever they want, but in a certain amount of Aristotelian mean. They don't abuse anything. That's the first part. And the second part is that what I wanted to tell you is that finally, after a lot of anthropological work that I did, it's ethnographic. And what you do is you go to these places and the blue zones and everywhere else, and you look for content. What are they saying that's repeated over and over again? And then you create what's called a content analysis, and you come up with words. And what I found is that 8 factors, 4 perception and 4 emotions that are very clear with them. So then I thought, okay, 4 perceptions and 4 emotions. What does neuropsychology have to say about the 4 perceptions? And the great discovery is that every one of those 4 perceptions is anti-stress. And look at psychoneurology, and all those 4 emotions are anti-inflammatory and antioxidants because of the molecules that are expressed. So what we have then is 8 factors that supersede lifestyle, supplements, and all these other things because they don't do any of those things. But what they do is live out, perceive, and emote the world with those 8 factors. So we developed a test. We developed a questionnaire that actually the good news is it's online now. And you can take the questionnaire and it'll give you specifics on how your profile will come out in relation to centenarian consciousness, called CCI, Centenarian Consciousness Index. And then it'll tell you what you need to do to improve that. Then we're doing something where we're measuring it's called a glycan age. It's not necessarily epigenetics. It's actually better than epigenetics because it measures the inflammation in the IgGs and the antibodies, the glycanization. So it gives you a systemic inflammation. Then it'll give you a biological age. With the work that we're doing, with the research we're doing, we have 50 centenarians, and we gave them the CCI and we gave them the glycan age. We already have 24. Every single one came out at least 20 years younger than their chronological age and very high on the CCI. So it's basically saying we can learn centenarian consciousness. That's a mouthful, but let me stop to see if you have any.
And I have a question. So we can learn it. Is there ever a time where we're too old to learn it and make those changes? And I'm asking this, and it's interesting, the glycan age. So there's a company called True Diagnostics
Yeah.
that does the epigenetic age testing and glycan age. And I did interpretations for them for about a year and a half until about, I guess it was a year or two ago, last November. And this is, I've talked about this several times on my program, where I've seen the young people aging at a much higher rate. They're years older than their chronological age. And some of the older people, there were some people in their 80s that were still aging younger. And so I wonder, it's interesting, and I'm wondering, is some of that because of this mindset that they have, like the centenarians? And
Yes.
is it ever too late?
It's part of that, and that particular one is really very comprehensive. It measures quite a few things. It doesn't measure the immune system's level of inflammation, which is okay. They're complementary with glycan age. Here's the other thing that we found. Why is it that inflammaging is the usual, I don't want to say normal because we'll find out that it's not normal, but the usual inflammation that you get with age. Okay, so you have inflammaging, and on some of the research that was done in China with about over 1,000 centenarians, I don't know how they found so many centenarians, but over 1,000. And they looked at the inflammaging, and the inflammaging, let's say somebody 30 was here, somebody 60 was here, and somebody, a centenarian here. But centenarians don't develop the illnesses from the inflammaging. So what they found was a compensatory reaction, which means that you look at it's a combination of T cells, the ratio of T helpers and T regulators, and you look at that ratio, and let's say for 30 here, for 70 here, and for centenarians here, lower than the normal. So they have a compensatory process going on where what used to be inflammatory becomes anti-inflammatory. And I think that has to do with the way that they perceive the world and they emote the world. So getting back to your question, I think that what happens is that we have, for example, entropy. You can't go against entropy. The second law of thermodynamics means that you go from order to disorder. And that's what inflammaging is. You can't go against it. You can stop it. You can slow it. But once things get to a certain amount of uncertainty, which is the disorder, chaos comes in, complexity comes in, and complexity has a different process. And what happens is we begin to get a compensatory complexity that doesn't stop the entropy, but it reduces the effect of the disorder.
Okay.
So you
Go ahead,
mentioned
Kate.
in the book something my mind was blown on this. It was a story about Mother Teresa, the video that you showed,
Oh, yeah.
and the people who were watching her do her amazing work that involved compassion and kindness and service. Was it the saliva that was measured?
Yeah, the IGAs, they measure with saliva, which is pretty good measure. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they showed in the saliva that these people had an increased immune response, is that right?
Yes.
Just
And
by
now
observing someone have
right.
service and compassion, and then if they imagined themselves having compassion and kindness and service, it was compounded. Is that
Just
right?
as good, right. And then they had another video to compare people watching the atrocities of the Nazis, and the IGAs went down and the stress went up. Why? Because we're a bioinformational field, we're in ecology, and that's what I was saying, the symbols become biology. And they found even more than that, that not only IGAs, but anti-inflammatory goes up and stress goes down, all kinds of valuable things happen just by expressing compassion to self and
Mhm.
others, or even watching it. So yeah, you're right. That was a major study. McClellan did the study on that.
It's so amazing. Can you
Yeah.
can you tell our listeners what the 8 factors are so that they get a sense of what the lifestyle is for this healthy aging?
Okay. Yeah. The the perception, the way that they perceive the world with both adversity and positive things. Because if you don't have good self-esteem, positive things are like an adversity.
Mm.
So they have a way of perceiving time, a way of perceiving aging, a way of perceiving health, and a way of perceiving curiosity, and perceiving how the world works with that. And the emotions, they have how they their gratitude, how they express gratitude or receive it, generosity, self-valuation, and a sense of curiosity is on the family on the right side too. So then when you but the culture goes against all of that. If I say to you, "Oh, I love your hair," and you say thank you, oxytocin, all kinds of things happening. You have endorphins, even serotonin. But if you say, "Oh, that's because you haven't seen it in the morning," nothing.
Oh, wow.
So
That's
the
remarkable.
language has a ceiling effect.
Yeah.
But and another thing, you go to a restaurant and you say to a waiter, "Oh, that's really great service." If they say thank you, because gratitude and generosity both have oxytocin, they say, "No problem." No oxytocin and a little bit of stress because we have hundreds of thousands of years of epigenetics memory that says no problem means I avoided adversity. So therefore, I just avoided a stressful situation. But that's what we do all the time. And centenarians are outliers. When you say to a centenarian, I said to one of them, I think it's in the book, 103, I said, "You're beautiful." She said, "Yeah, I've always been beautiful. Ever since I was a little girl, I was beautiful." So they don't have any problem.
Wow.
They,
To be able to yeah, to be able to say that and own
yeah,
it, which is something you don't hear anymore. People say they're so conceited. There's
yeah,
a big difference
that's right. And
between that and conceit.
the cultures teach you to do the best you can, and when you do it, deny it when they mention it to you or minimize it. So it's why? Because they wanna keep you in the collectivism. They wanna keep you collective, they don't want you to individuate because then you go away from the tribe.
Mhm. Yeah, so the belonging is really involved here, and the sort of pretzels that people will twist themselves into to earn belonging instead of showing up genuinely and authentically and being potentially positive and affirming. If their culture doesn't value those things, then they might show up self deprecating or insecure just to earn that belonging. But in the end, what your research is showing is that it shortens your life to do those things.
Yeah, because you're not getting the all the epigenetic benefits that we learned, that gratitude without quid pro quo is really important.
Mhm.
And one of the things that I do when I work with corporations, I went to Philippines, for example, very collectivist culture. And I'll ask collectivist questions. How many people here are good with their parents? Everybody raises their hand. How many people here are good with their kids? They raise their hands. How many people here are brilliant and bright? Nobody raises their hand because that
Not one.
not one. And then they look around for permission. And then an outlier will raise a hand, and then two or three will raise their hand.
Wow.
Ah,
So,
one of the things that I picked up on your book also in your book that really sat with me was breaking bread.
a ritual. Yeah.
Now, you yeah, it's the again, it was these things that you said were rituals as opposed to routines. The Centenarians had like a nighttime ritual where
Yes.
they would do specific things, and other people would say, "Oh, that's my night routine." But it's not. It's a ritual, and there's a difference. It's the routine is doing it because you have to do it. I have to wash my face. I have to brush my teeth or get a shower, put on my moisturizer. I have to do that. But it's my choice if I want to sit and journal. Is that now, would you consider the journaling if that's something that feels really good to me that I choose to do as a part of a routine at night? Does that then translate into a ritual, a healthy ritual, or would that still be considered a routine?
The ritual is a routine that has been raised to a level of meaning that has value for you. So if and that again, that's an epigenetic transfer that we have. Why is it that it's so important to break bread? Because back in the day of the woods, because not everybody lived in the caves, the woods and the caves, it was very important in the evening to have light, to have fire, and to share where the danger was, where the safety was, where the food was. So that becomes a real powerful thing. So when COVID hit, one of the things that I did is, okay, what is my epigenetic history? I have to go back to the cave. So every night I had a candlelit dinner. Candles have a valuable a psychoneurological value, and now I keep doing it. I do it every time. So that's the power of it. So a ritual becomes something that identifies you with who you are in relationship to your history, and then the immune system responds because it's good for you. It's something that keeps you healthy. The immune system will and immune, nervous, and endocrine system will respond.
Mm. Is it possible that you could make routines into rituals just
Yeah,
with a little more
That's
intention?
question.
Like Susan, what you were saying, like you wash your face and then put on your moisturizer. But what if you're doing so with a sense of self-love and treating your skin with kindness and appreciating your body for moving you through your day? Then does it become a ritual?
yes, because it becomes a ceremony. Then you bring the value, like the ceremony of tea with the Japanese or the or the Koreans, how they bathe and all that. It has to have self awareness. It has to have value, and it has to have a sense of identity. And I'll tell you something that's really wonderful about the immune system. Aristotle, who's my favorite teacher, um, 2,300 years ago, said the hedonic life is not enough. The life for purpose, just for pleasure is not enough. He called it the life of eudaimonia, which means the life of F or U, daimonia, means good fellow, good soul. So he said that you find pleasure in meaning, in service, and in purpose. So recently, there have been some studies that have been replicated, and they looked at, okay, let's divide the hedonic people, the psychologically hedonic people, and people who are more in the eudaimonia. And then they measure something really specific to the immune system, CTRAs, which are some genes in the immune cells that work against adversity. So the people that were hedonic had worse response to adversity than people who were more Aristotelian. And yet they couldn't tell the difference. When you asked them what's the level of pleasure, they both had the same level of pleasure. The immune system could tell the difference between the two.
Wow.
So,
Subconsciously, we don't even know
yeah, we
that
don't
this
even
is
know the value.
happening. Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things in your book is you have exercises that you go through in each chapter, which you call sessions. So in each session, it's bringing awareness to that mind body connection. And when I onboard someone onto that AI based platform, one of the first questions asked is where you are with your mind body connection. And I'll have some people like, I'm there. I get it. But the majority of people are like, I don't know, what is that? There really is no awareness. And that's one of the beautiful things that I really saw in your book was going through those exercises. One of them I did at the top of a mountain
Oh,
on Friday. And I was sitting there and I got to one word because it was in chapter 1. And I got to one of the words and it hit me with so much emotion that I wasn't aware of. And then driving to go hiking yesterday, I was doing some of the others, and I know you're supposed to sit with your eyes closed, but I was in such a state that I just could
yeah, you
feel
can
it,
do it.
and I wanted to go through, and I could feel these things in that how my body was reacting to just words. And that's what I found so fascinating that I'd never put together, like heart rate increasing, the stomach feeling like it's coming
Yeah.
coming from your gut up to where the stomach is, and then other times of just total peace. That awareness is such a key. But one question I had back to the breaking bread, I know all over the place here, but back to the breaking bread. In the book, you talked about breaking bread with family. So there's some of us that I don't have any family left. So is it family like in quotations? So family of anybody is that represents love or peace or gratitude in your life, or were these centenarians, is it specific to actual family
No,
with
no,
the
it's
breaking bread?
the people that are worthy in your life, but also yourself. Also yourself. You are the company, and that's what I'll be talking about in the webinar that you know about. I'll be defining what selfhood is and what loneliness and longing and what's healthy, what's unhealthy. You could be alone and be healthier than someone in a relationship. depending on the relationship you have with yourself. So it's just it's a ritual with self or self and people that are worthy in your life. Doesn't matter. They don't have to be family.
Thank you for clarifying. I love that. Ritual with yourself. Um,
I think there's a lot of your work that I find has so much value is the piece about embodiment, how you take it out of just the cerebral space where so much of the medical community lives, and you're actually integrating this embodied state of feeling it and experiencing it in a sensory somatic way, and you're weaving in this contemplative psychology piece, which I thought was beautiful too. I went to Naropa University in Boulder, and
Yeah.
it was founded by a Buddhist monk, and they have a contemplative psychology program, and that was my introduction to it. So it was so beautiful to read this by a medical doctor. You just don't see this fusion with so much of our Western medicine. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about embodiment and how it really locks this epigenetic information into the lived experience beyond just our thoughts.
Yes, and Trumpa was the founder, and he wrote a book called Spiritual Materialism, which is I'm more spiritual than you. That's ego spirit. So even
Yes.
if it's an embodied thing, the thing about it is that if you look at it from the I jump from neuropsychology to epigenetics to anthropology because one cannot explain everything. So
Mhm.
if you look at the neuropsychology of embodiment, is that when you learn something, the neuromaps are not learning it just cognitively. They're learning the sensorial part, the procedural memory. It's learning a whole bioinformational field. So if you try to deal with it intellectually, it's just a piece of the whole field. When you embody it, what's happening is that you're going back to the total learning that you had, or you're learning something new, but you're not saying, "Let me learn this, and I'm going to learn it in my head." The neural maps don't pick up on the sensorial and everything because you don't have the where it landed, the sensorial printing, the emotions, and so it's all together. And that's why you have to embodiment. If you don't, for example, if you say, I'm a good person, you can say it 1,000 times. Affirmations disembodied don't work. It doesn't work that way. But here's how it could work. And this would be a technique, very simple, but very neuropsychologically complex. You say, I'm a good person. And then the memories, no, you're not. Look at what you did 2 weeks ago. All right. So what you do is, I'm a good person, the mantra, the brain needs evidence. So I go back, when was I a good person? Oh, 3 weeks ago, I was a good person. Let me embody the print of that. The fingerprint of that. Okay. Another one, another one, another one. Okay, that's the beginning. Then for the next 2 weeks, it takes the brain that long. You do things that give you evidence that you're a good person. Then it becomes embodied. And the brain has the neurotransmitters and the neuromaps that allow, yeah, I'm a good person. Okay, I am because it's got evidence.
Yeah. So you really can't fake it till you make it. You have
All
to
right.
truly integrate it.
Sure.
And I appreciate that you can source from memory because we've all had lived experience. We've all had good experiences, challenging experiences. So you can source from the relationships that were healthy, the moments that were meaningful, the gratification that was really profound. Even if it's not in the present moment, your brain and your nervous system will still experience it as though it
You
is.
know the difference in between time space. It doesn't cognition, but the brain doesn't. It's like when you're watching the it doesn't know that it's news. It responds. Cognition knows, but it responds as if it's happening now. You're watching a rape. That you're watching a rape, and
right.
you don't want to watch television when you're eating because of that. But the time space is not something that the brain can understand without the experience of the embodiment. Otherwise, you think you can say, okay, no, this is just a film. This is just a dream. The brain doesn't know the difference. You have to get out of it to understand that it's not that. But why expose yourself to something like that and then put yourself through hell for no reason?
Mhm.
So I'm gonna. Okay, are you good with switching up
Yeah.
here to talking about the myths around anti-aging? Because I was listening to these yesterday, and I was in my car cheering you on, Dr. Martinez. And then there were some I was like, wow, I didn't realize that. And so I would love for you to tell everybody what these myths around anti-aging are, because I think some are gonna knock some people's socks off.
Um, the I do some workshops that I call the cultural aging, and they're portals from the book. That they're portals, they're culture portals, like newborn, child, adolescent, young adult, especially middle age. All of those are culturally determined. And the culturally determined will tell you how you need to respond, the space perception that you need to have of things, how much authority you have, how much control, all those things. So if you're not aware of that, you're going to be living what you see out there. And also, let's say you're 10 and your mother was 50, but she looked what would be 70 now. Then you have a landmark of 50. And if you don't watch it, you work yourself up to being looking like 70 when you're 50 because it's the mapping that you do. And the research on that, for example, if you have people, and there are many studies, but what you have people in two groups. One group, you tell them, okay, we're going to shock you for 1 minute, 15 seconds for 1 minute. And then they put some kind of measures to see how much receptors of pain are going to be activated. And they'll give you a subjective scale. They say 1 to 10, what was it? Another group, they tell them, we're going to shock you every 15 seconds for 5 minutes. The brain makes time space and they stop at 1 minute so they can measure both. The ones who thought that it was going to be 5 minutes, they have more subjective and more objective pain than the others because the brain did a time space mapping. And that's what it does with everything, time space. Oh, so at 70, so never tell your age because they'll block you and they'll put you, oh, you look so good. That means you shouldn't. Or you're not looking good. It doesn't matter. You don't tell your age. That's it. Some people say, you don't tell your age. You have a problem with that? No, you have a problem with wanting to know my age. I don't care about my age. Ask me what I've done with my time and space. That's different.
I loved that when you said that in the book. It Loved
So
it.
that's why the time space is really important to understand that. And you have to go back sometimes. You can do a little meditation or contemplative, and you go back and say, who were my culture editors? What did my mother look like? What did my grandfather look like? And 30, if you look at, for example, you look at pictures from the 40s and you see somebody who's 30 and they look like they're 60, they're different. Not just because they smoked, but because an increase in awareness that's going on that's different. And it's not just medicine, it's many things. So you have that. And then intellectually, you say, "Oh, no, that's not gonna be me." But your intimate language of love is what deals with with your emotions and your biology, and you're gonna go ahead and become that, and especially middle age. Middle age is a determinant because you're saying, "Okay, here it is, a day before you're not middle age, but today you're middle age. So you have to dress middle age, act middle age, and get sick like the middle age." And if you defy that and you say, "Oh, I'm going back to school, I'm gonna fall in love." Oh, no, you gotta save so you can then have enough money to go to a nursing home and then take care of you. That's the mapping. Okay, so you wait, and that's exactly what I talked to a friend who's not that old and he's in a nursing home or in a assisted living. And I asked him, how long are you gonna be there? I said, he's told me that he had about 3 or 4 years left with the money. He said, "Well, that's about 3 or 4 years is what he has left to live." And that's the mapping, that's what's gonna happen.
Oh,
So,
wow.
you have to be careful.
You know it was interesting, I did a podcast with a man last year who runs a cancer organization, and he said, "People are told they have 6 months to live. Does a doctor actually know that they have 6 months to live? No, it's guessing." And he said, "The majority of these people will die in 6 months, and it's not of cancer. But they get in their head that I'm supposed to die in 6 months."
Yeah, because that kind of that's bad science. That's based on averages, and we're not an average. So the good scientists would say, on the average, people live 6 months with this illness. On this side of the curve, they live 6 weeks. On this side of the curve, they live 8 years. Let's figure out what these people are doing. That's good science. So it's not a sentence, it's an
Mm. Mhm. One of the other studies you talked about in the book was the group they sent from the nursing home in their 80s. And for 5 days, they were told to go and act like they were in their 50s, I believe it was.
Ellen Langer did that work from Harvard, yeah.
Yeah. And they went there and you saw all these massive changes pretty rapidly in even how their appearance changed. And then when they went back to the nursing home, they were right back to them not carrying their own bags, just being
Uh,
treated like
they
they were old.
yes, they weren't in the nursing home, but it's almost like it because they were grandfathers in their 80s, like you said. And then what Ellen did is she had them into 2 groups. One group, and you'll see why reminiscing is not that good. One group, they said, like what you're saying, "Okay, now you're gonna live as if you were 30 years younger, but you're gonna be in a time capsule. The the movies and the television and the newspapers are gonna be from 30 years ago. You need to bring a photo of you when you were 30, and all you can talk about is as if you were 30 years younger." The other group, they said, "Why don't you come in and talk about the good old days?" But no change. In 6 days, they had all strength of grip, all kinds of things that are considered to be fragility. They changed all of that. They came in like old men. They left playing touch football. But then when they went back to their homes, or some of them, I don't think they were in nursing home, but some of them went back to their homes, which is like a nursing home the way they were treated.
Oh, that's right. Somewhere
And
living
then,
with family.
and then he would say, "Let me get some coffee." "No, Grandpa, I'll get it for you. Let me get some coffee." Finally, he would acquiesce and go back to Grandpa. They lost it in 6 months. So she does
That
it differently now. She
that's
does.
the embodied piece,
Yeah.
right? Is that they
Yep.
were living as though they were 30 years
Well,
younger, not
in the
just thinking
biology,
about it.
Mhm.
but the others were reminiscing, and reminiscing is not that good
Yeah.
because, in the good old days, I was so good looking. In the good old days, you don't have that anymore. So what
Mhm.
actually, those people got worse or didn't improve, the ones who
Mm,
were living in the good old days, and you would think, "Oh, let's reminisce." No, it's not that good.
right. You have to actually be in the good old days in
Yeah.
your own reconstruction of it, not just your memory of it.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically why act your age? If you don't feel it, you're controlling that. I don't act like someone who's gonna turn a milestone. I'm not gonna tell my age. I
Oh,
think
no,
everybody who listens to me knows what it is,
you
but
can say,
I
I don't act like like X."
no, I'm
You
not I
told
don't
me X.
act like X. I don't get guessed looking like X. It's all the mindset. I still will go out there and I'll t hike, compete, do whatever with people 30 years younger than me. I don't care. It's
Oh, and I'll tell you what we're finding, that another good news is we're finding is that all the measures that they're doing now with all of the epigenetic measures and the glycan age, all of them are looking basically at stress, and they're looking at inflammation. But there's some new research now that's looking at fragility, fragileness. When you get to a certain age and you begin to have fragile signs, at that point you begin to get sick and you live 4 to 5 years with illnesses and all kinds of things that are great for the insurance company because they can charge you more, and the doctors can charge you more. So now we're doing a test that actually looks at some research in Toronto and also in Mexico with 2 clinics. We found 4 markers, 2 that are the inflammatory markers and 2 that are fragility markers. So we measure that, and we teach them to all the fragility can be changed. The fragility is loss of mass, muscle mass, strength of
Musclemans.
grip, all these things that can be changed. For example, you ask someone who's 80 to stand up on 1 foot, and they can do it only for 5 seconds if they're in fragility. Neuropsychologically, you can teach them rehab, and you can teach them slowly. Start with a chair, and then put your foot up, and 5 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever, and you go up. You can go up as like an 18-year-old. So you retrain the cortex, the occipital cortex, which is the one that gait. You notice that the older people have the wide gait to compensate for the occipital.
Mhm.
But the same thing with the wide gait. What you do is you holding onto something so you don't fall at first. You you bring 1 foot up, and then you close your eyes so you don't have any visual cues, and you try to increase it, increase it, increases. It begins to fix what was going on with the occipital. So all of it is reversible. But we're going to measure that, and we're measuring the early signs of fragility, and then rehabbing the fragility with, and also measuring what we have with the CCI with our questionnaire. So it's really very exciting research, and everything reversible.
It's never too late
No, it's never
to
too late.
start.
The brain doesn't know. It's just that it's the time space that you put into it. Now, it's not miracle cure or anything. It's just a
Mm,
process of changing. But when they say, well, as you grow older, you're gonna be more fragile, your bones are gonna be more fragile, you're gonna lose muscle mass if, and they don't say if, but they stop there, if you don't continue to do weight training. You have to do weight training, not just running, weight training. And for example, about 15 years ago, I was doing some weights and the machine, and I was doing one of these lifting machines, and 50 pounds was a lot. It's just a lot. I thought, okay, what do I do now? Now I do 110. Before the brain, the chest was a 150. I can't do 150. Now I do 205. So is it aging or is it what you do with the time space?
I love that.
What you do with
One of the other things I thought was pretty profound was centenarians don't tend to die of cancer or illness
Very few, yeah.
because
They
we're all
have
set up that we have
what's
to.
called organ exhaustion, and then they die 2 or 3 days that, or they die in their sleep or falling off horses, the horsemen of the Caucasus. But yeah, they don't have these many. The highest percentage of don't have the prolonged fragility, 4 to 5 years of illness and all kinds of things. They don't have that because they live the 8 factors that we're talking about here.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Did you
so
have anything, Kate?
taking their health is lasting them longer, and then when it's time to die, which it will be for all of us, it's a quick, mostly
Yeah,
painless process.
health span is they continue their health span.
Mhm.
And the more health span you have, the more probability of staying healthy. Somebody who has a good health span at 80 has a better probability than somebody at 30 to live healthier because they have more of the health span. The complexity that I talked about, the compensatory complexity helps you more and more and more
Mhm.
as you grow older
So it
because
actually helps you as you age.
yes, you have more evidence of or and knowledge of compensatory processes. That's what the system does.
Mhm.
Unless you screw it up by following the the usual process of the entropy. As you grow older, what do you want? For example, you go to a gerontologist, not all of them, but most will say, time is passing a lot faster as I grow older. They tell you it's because the brain changes and also you have less time to live. So that causes existential anxiety. It's nothing to do with it. It's the level of creativity. Creativity increases the elongation of time, the perception of elongation of time. So in psychology, what we call the first 30 means that in your first 30 years is your first marriage, your first divorce, your first heartbroken, your graduation. Then after that is repetition. So repetition diminishes the perception of time. If you stay curious like centenarians, they elongate time. You ask centenarians, is time passing faster? No, it's passing the same way because they're curious. Curiosity elongates the perception of time.
Mm. So what would you say to people who have sort of the typical aches and pains of life or of aging? Maybe somebody's got acid reflux or someone has, I don't know, early stage of prediabetes, something like this. What would you say to them to help them change their paradigm and potentially get into maybe even a symptom-free body so that they could realign with this long longevity perspective?
To treat us to treat it as if there were 20, the perceptions are different. To what can you do at 20? So for example, someone, and this is the learned aging, someone is 30 and they go from the kitchen to the bedroom and they can't remember what they were doing there. So okay, no big deal. Somebody who's 70, ooh, dementia. And what happens then is that if you think you have dementia, you're going to be stressed. Stress will affect the hippocampus, which affects dementia. So you're creating a dementia-like kind of thing. So all you have to do is say, okay, wait a minute. I don't remember. Let me go back to the kitchen where you archived and you'll remember. That's it. Very simple. But so you have to attribute it to younger rather than older. Otherwise, you say pre-diabetes in the family, you have it, you have it. So what do you want? That's it. How about the people that didn't have diabetes? How did they live? How did they so you can try to make the changes you can. Like, for example, if you need medication, fine, but diet and all the kinds of things that work against
Lifestyle.
and then you find that you can change things. Not everything, but you can change quite a bit.
Mhm. What do you think is the biggest barrier for modern medicine to start thinking this way? Because it's so rare that you hear this and it's so powerful and important, but why are more doctors not hearing this or sharing this with their patients?
Because they're not taught. Now some schools are bringing in psychoneuroimmunology into their medical schools, but, they don't teach that. Like, they have maybe 2 or 3 weeks or maybe 1 week of nutrition, so they
Mhm.
don't teach that.
Oh,
It's
yeah, if
a
that.
reductionistic model, which is very good because it's got some wonderful things to offer, but it needs to bring the other side, which is the psychoneuroimmunology of it and the other components of anthropology. So, for example, a doctor will say, "Hey, look, a an anti let's say not antidepressant, but for example, an antibody or something that would affect an infection. Okay, you have an infection, you have to take an antibiotic, and it's going, and that's it. You go to the jungles, and it's the same. No, it's not the same because if you have a cut here, you know that there's pathogens there, and the doctor says we're going to give you an antibiotic, and it's going to fix it. But if you're in the Amazonian part of Bolivia where there's a shaman who says a spirit just entered your wound, and unless we do a cleansing, it's not going to work. You're going to need 2, 3 times more antibiotics, or maybe none of it would work because of the belief system that you have about that particular. So, not even antibiotics. You can have someone, you can give them an injection, and you tell them this is a bronchial dilator, and it's just an injection of saline, and 60% of the people will have bronchodilators. But even more, they'll say this is a bronchodilator and it's a constrictor, and 60% will override the biochemistry and do what the culture editor told them.
Yeah, this is
And they
the
don't teach that.
placebo nocebo.
Mind.
Yeah, they don't teach
It's
that.
all
And if
mind.
you learn that, then you could be an incredible doctor.
So
Yeah.
crazy though, because the
It
research is out there, and you would
Yeah,
hope that doctors would be continuing to see what's new in the research and
a
in
lot of them are.
educate
Yeah.
themselves.
Functional medicine is helping with that, and I think, psychoimmunology is really helping. My mentor who created psychoimmunology was a doctor. He was a psychiatrist researcher, and he created psychoneuroimmunology. Um,
Huh.
and so UCLA has a center for psychoimmunology research, and they have doctors going through it. So it's changing, but it's slowly changing because and partly not to blame doctors, they don't have a lot of time. The psychiatrist has about 8 minutes to see you, and then they have the nurse assistants and the nurse practitioners, and medicine has become a conveyor belt medicine. It's not their fault.
Sure. And it's sick care, it's not well care.
Yeah,
The other thing in that you talked about with the centenarians was they don't go to the doctor. They're not there where since COVID, people are running and getting COVID tests with allergies. They're like,
yeah,
"I need to test, test, test. Everything has to be tested." Why? Get your annuals, see what's happening with your body so that you can get things moving in the right direction when you know they're not. But this constant test, 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 let's keep looking for things that are wrong. And when you keep looking for wrong, you find more wrong. No different than when you keep looking for things that are wrong with your life, you're going to find things wrong. But when you look for good, what do you need to be in balance? What does your body, what does your mind need to create this? It's a whole different paradigm of how you look at things. And
sure.
that yeah.
And you also, of course, you always have to look at science as a good indicator of what's going on with you, but not make it a sentence. You can work with doctors as your teachers, not as your conveyors of bad news, but as your teachers. But the doctors don't have the time to do that. That's the problem. They don't
Mm-mm,
have time. I have a
mm-mm.
friend who's in his 70s, and he's a doctor, and he went to a doctor, and I talk about it, I think, in the book, but he said to the doctor, "Look, my right knee's hurting." He said, "Well, you got a little inflammation there. What do you want at your age?" And he said, "The same thing that my left knee has, that is the same age, and it doesn't have inflammation."
Love it. I love it.
So but so you gotta get out of the reductionist world, but you don't wanna knock doctors, you just wanna help them enhance what they have to
Yeah.
have tremendous knowledge of physiology and biochemistry and all these other things that are very important.
Mhm.
I love to work with physicians, in with, for some of my clients because it's a great partnership. You have the epigenetic component, the lifestyle component, and I think that's where the medical community misses, is they're not bringing that lifestyle component into it. What is this person's social life like? It's not just the food and exercise. Well, go eat right and start working out. We have to look at creativity. What's their work like? You had talked about, I think it was in the book, going to work to a miserable job, and then you retire, and these people can tend to die within 5 years after retiring from a job that they hated. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
all of those things are such important factors that a doctor doesn't have the time or the knowledge to sit with someone and go through. So they either throw a medication at them or just give the basic and just go eat right and exercise. And what is that for each person is different.
the good news is we've already trained over 150 doctors worldwide in biocognition, and they use it in their practice. But the thing about the
Love it.
CCI that's so good is that any test, it's the only test that I know, I've been looking for quite a while, that actually has correlations with psychoimmunology. You could do the MMPI, the Briggs-Myers, you can do blah, blah, blah. None of them have any connection at all. These 4 factors on perception, these 4 factors on emotions, all have correlations with psychoimmunological processes of inflammation and stress, or anti-inflammation, anti-stress. So you can actually correlate them with biomarkers to see what's going on.
Yeah.
Where can you find that quiz?
It's on my website and
It's on your website.
yeah, biocognitive.com, and then go to services and then scroll down to Longeometrics. That's our group that does that, and you can take it, and you can take it by itself, and it'll give you. You don't really need another person to tell you, but it'll give you all the information. But if you want to go deeper and you want some mentoring, you can get it with 1 hour of training or more training. But the test will be really good, and it gives you a lot of information because it tells you how you come out compared to centenarians and how you come out compared to your age group,
Mm.
and the things that you need to do to improve
Love it.
working and to improve what's not working.
I'm gonna do that today. I can't wait to
Yeah,
take
so that's why
immediately.
I don't want to wait. So Kate and I are
And
going to be
use it
texting each
you
other
can use
right
it for your
after this. You
clients.
know that?
Yeah.
You can use it for your clients
Yeah,
because
I know. I was thinking that too.
like, for example, let's
Yeah.
say that you come out low on gratitude. And I'll give you an example how you look at that. Look how powerful this is. We had the fortune, one of our students gave it to father and mother who have twins. You can't get any better than that. All 4,
Mm.
they were not identical twins, fraternal. That's pretty close genetically. And they found one twin was better in admiration than the other. And they looked at the father and the mother, and the father was lower in admiration than the mother. And then the student asked, "So the one that has a lower, who does he identify with?" And he said, "His father. Look at the
Oh,
modeling effect."
wow.
And then you can teach that gratitude, this is what happens, admiration, this is what happens. What kills admiration? Envy. If you say, "Oh, I love that," oxytocin, all kinds of oxytocin you get. But if you say, "Oh, yeah, he's rich and he did it," no oxytocin.
Mm.
Love it.
This is a
Um,
good place to put in a plug for parenting,
Yeah.
that parents have so much power really to help shape the next generation. And if parents can read your book and learn about psychoneural immunology and really help to teach the next generation, especially with smartphones and the media and social media and all the things that parents struggle with, if they can teach their kids gratitude, appreciation, admiration, all these things you're teaching, compassion, kindness on this level, and model it also from the parental experience as well, then you're more likely to have a next generation that embodies this better. Because now we have the resources and information, and isn't it our responsibility when we have more to do more?
Yeah, and I think that you're right on target because what you can do is teach parents that what the kids learn is not what you tell them. The incidental learning that they get is from what you do. If
Yeah.
it's failure, they're gonna learn failure. If you start, "Don't be like me," forget it. You'll try, but then you live their world because that's the incidental learning that you learn. We learn by observation first before we have language. So it's observation
mhm.
and then comes language later. So yeah, you're right. It's something that's a great, and these people, for example, now they're working on how to increase admiration consciousness in the family, so everybody gains from it.
That's lovely.
Kate, you've got one last question before we close with Dr. Martinez, and then I know you're going to have to jump off. And Dr. Martinez, I'll ask you while the two of us are still on to talk about the course you have your webinar coming up.
Yes, there's a
Don't
webinar coming
leave.
up on May 10th, and Central Time, and it'll be from 2 to 3:45, and it's something that you'll never hear anywhere else. It's about longevity, but longevity, the title is Solitude, Loneliness, and Longevity, and how one affects the other, what is healthy longing and what's unhealthy longing, and the psychoterminology of each. You don't have to have a medical background or anything, but it's very important because we tend to think that people give us the things that we need in a relationship. You have to give them to yourself and then co-author them in the relationship. So that's what it's about.
That sounds
And all the sign up information will be in the show notes as well, as will all of your contact information, your website, all your books will be on there as well. And since the since the webinar is coming up pretty quickly, everybody get down into the show notes, sign up. You want to be taught by Mario. And then Kate's going to close with a final question for
all
Dr.
right.
Martinez.
So everyone, all the listeners who are used to listening to the podcast, as we transition into having me as a co-host, we're going to start asking this question at the end of every episode, and it just helps wrap it up and bring it back into the experience of the amazing expert that we're interviewing. Dr. Martinez, what are you doing in your life presently to bring a radiant life through epigenetics into your experience?
First is to find out what my co-authors taught me, what they taught me about success, what they taught me about health, aging, and all those things, and then beginning to enter what I call outlier consciousness, which is to give it up, and not intellectually, but with the methods of it, to give up, for example, the failures that I learned from family, and to look at the success of the family, to look at the outliers in the family. I didn't know that my mother was an outlier till she passed away. And I said, wait, my mother is incredible. Those kind of things. And then one thing that I learned is that centenarians have two things that happen to them that are very difficult. They have losses by death, and they have unrequited love. Someone not loving you without your permission. And what I found is that with the loss, so you don't get sick or you don't die with them, the loss when somebody dies is you mourn by celebrating having known them. That's how you mourn. Unrequited love, when you're not loved anymore, you mourn by bringing faith to your journey. Those two things, it's like almost like a transformational process that you put your energy and you put your biochemistry and everything on what works. And it doesn't mean you Pollyanna, oh, how wonderful, this person's no longer with me. No, you mourn, but you mourn by putting it into the curiosity in my journey. And then when you go back and you can say, what are all the relationships that didn't work with me? One centenarian said, every Valentine's, I drink a glass of champagne, and I thank all the people that had the good sense to say no to me.
So,
great.
so are you so you're saying you're putting those principles into your life,
Oh,
and
yeah.
with working with this, do you find it easier? Do you find it gets easier, or is still just that learning component that you just soak up and just embrace this journey?
No, it gets easier because then you find out, and that's what I'll talk about in the webinar, that we have demons and sirens that come from the ancient brain. They're there. The demon will bring you fear. The siren will try to get you hedonic. So they say you want to go work out. The demon will come out. You say, I'm getting up at 6 and I'm going to go work out. The demon comes out and look, it's raining. You could have an accident. Why don't you fear? Or the siren come out. You can sleep another half hour. It's okay. And the way to break that is Aristotle. We say no, and you have movement. No, and movement breaks that. And then the siren gets, no, come on, look and see. No, and if you don't have movement, it'll get you. Those simple things have powerful neuropsychological effects.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all this fantastic knowledge. Everybody, the mind body code. It is fascinating.
Thank you.
It's on audiobook. I have the hardcover, but I have to listen because I don't have time to read. So I like to listen. You can get it through audiobook, whatever works for you. and he told us that it's now in Spanish. So if your first language is Spanish, it is now translated in Spanish
Yeah, it's a
and
Código
available.
Fuerte. So it's in Spanish now. Yeah. So it's very good.
Thank you so much for your time today.
And congratulations on the work you're both doing. It's really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
as
And you
well.
too.
As well.
Yes. Yes.
Enjoy,
Thank
and
you.
we'll talk soon.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please, please, please share this podcast because I think this information can help pretty much every single one of us out there. So share away, and you get to see Kate and her first co-hosting, and the wonderful Dr. Mary Martinez. So thank you so much. Get out there, make it a great day, and be your most authentic selves. Thanks so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who would find the information useful. Also, if you can leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, it'll help the information get out to others. You can check out my podcast site and sign up for my newsletter for updates and upcoming shows, and that link is in the show notes below. But go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.